The mansion was so quiet it felt like time itself had stopped inside its walls. A long hallway stretched forward, lined with portraits of powerful, expressionless faces. Generations of the Vanderholt family stared out from their golden frames like silent judges watching over their empire. Into this silence walked Mariah. Her footsteps were soft, respectful, almost apologetic. She moved like a woman who had spent her whole life working in spaces that weren't built for her. Her uniform was neat, her posture humble, but her eyes held a depth that spoke of years of carrying other people's burdens. She pushed her cleaning cart to the start of the hall, took a deep breath, lifted her cloth, and began her routine. Frame after frame, ancestor after ancestor. Dust wiped, glass cleared, nothing unusual. But as she neared the final portrait at the end of the corridor, her hands slowed, then stopped entirely. Her entire body went rigid, like her heart recognized something before her mind did. Mariah stepped closer. Her fingers trembled as she reached out and lifted the last speck of dust from the glass. A teenage boy. Warm brown eyes. Soft, gentle smile. And a small crescent birthmark above his left eyebrow. Mariah's lips parted. A breath escaped her chest with the sound of something breaking inside. She whispered, barely audible, "Elias." Her knees softened. Her hand pressed against the frame, as if she expected the boy to feel real beneath her touch. She stared, unbelieving. No, it can't be. My baby, how are you here?" Tears blurred her vision. She wiped them quickly, but they kept coming. Her voice cracked. "I used to tuck you in every night. I held you when you cried, I." A cold voice cut her off. "Mariah." She turned sharply. Mr. Jonathan Vanderholt stood behind her, tall, stiff, eyes narrowed like he'd walked into a crime scene rather than his own hallway. His voice was clipped, controlled, dangerously calm. "What exactly are you doing touching that portrait?" Mariah pointed a trembling finger at the painting. "Sir, this boy, he lived with me at the orphanage. I raised him. I know this face. I know this child." Vanderholt's expression changed, not surprise, but something darker. "That," he said slowly, "is my son." Mariah shook her head, tears falling freely now. "No, sir, I'm telling you the truth. This child disappeared from our orphanage 12 years ago, and no one ever found him." The hallway felt colder. The portrait seemed to watch them. And for the first time, Mr. Vanderholt looked afraid. What they didn't know would change everything. Evelyn Thomas had always moved through other people's worlds quietly, the way someone walks through a museum after hours, careful not to touch anything, careful not to disturb what was never meant for them. That morning, as she walked up the long stone driveway of the Whitmore mansion, her worn shoes felt even smaller against the marble path. The house sat like a sleeping giant, elegant but cold, the kind of place where every window looked like it was judging you. Evelyn adjusted the strap of her cleaning bag on her shoulder. She had been working as a housemaid for almost 12 years across different homes, but something about this mansion made her chest tighten every time she approached it. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the echo of wealth she could never touch. Or maybe it was the man who owned the house, Mr. Adrian Whitmore, whose reputation carried both admiration and fear in the city. She had only spoken to him twice, once when she was hired and once when she accidentally bumped into him in the hallway. He was polite, but in the kind of way that came from habit, not heart. His eyes always looked like they were somewhere else, somewhere colder. Evelyn pushed the door open gently and stepped into the vast foyer. Her breath caught, as it always did, seeing the twin golden staircases curling upward like the arms of a royal ballroom. She moved slowly, making sure she didn't leave a single footprint on the polished floor. She worked alone today. The other maids were assigned to the guest house. She didn't mind. She preferred silence. Silence didn't ask questions. Still, the weight of memory followed her. Even now, at 45, she often woke up hearing children's laughter echoing in her ears, laughter from the orphanage she once lived in, where she spent the first half of her life before aging out. Her childhood friends, the ones she had taken care of like siblings, would always be the invisible part of her, the part no employer ever saw. She had spent years wiping the tears of children who had lost everything, children who carried abandonment like a scar across their spirit. One boy in particular still lived inside her heart like a ghost. but she pushed the thought away quickly. That kind of remembering hurt more than it healed. She walked through the main hallway, dusting the delicate wooden shelves covered with artifacts from around the world. As she moved, she noticed something strange, a large crate leaning against the wall. It looked newly delivered. Evelyn hesitated, then whispered to herself that it wasn't any of her concern, not unless someone left it open. She continued down the hallway until she reached the portrait room, the one room she hated cleaning. The Whitmore family had a tradition of hanging enormous portraits of their ancestors, each one larger than life, staring down as if guarding their legacy. Evelyn would always keep her eyes low when dusting here. Something about being watched by 100 wealthy strangers made her feel like a trespasser. She pushed the door open with her elbow. But today, the room felt different. A cloth-covered frame leaned against the center easel, fresh and untouched, the edges still wrapped. Evelyn's heart skipped, unsure why her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't been told about a new painting. Carefully, she stepped closer, drawn in by an inexplicable pull. The cloth wasn't fully secured. A small corner hung loose, just enough to reveal the bottom edge of the portrait. And there she saw it. A pair of familiar sneakers. Her breath hitched. No, it couldn't be. She reached trembling fingers toward the cloth, hesitating, then pulled it back just enough to reveal the lower half of the figure in the painting. Jeans, a shirt she recognized, a pose she knew by heart, the posture of a boy who used to sit outside the orphanage gate every evening, waiting for a hope that never came. Her knees weakened. It looked just like Evelyn. The sudden voice behind her jolted her violently, and she flinched, dropping the cloth entirely. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Whitmore's head butler, Bernard, tall, stoic, with a face carved from stone. He had never spoken her name before. His presence felt like an accusation. Evelyn scrambled to cover the painting again, her voice shaking. I wasn't touching anything, sir. The cloth just slipped. Bernard studied her for a moment longer than necessary, his eyes darkening with something she didn't understand. That portrait, he said quietly, was not supposed to be revealed yet. Mr. Whitmore is returning this afternoon. Finish your cleaning and leave the room. His tone was firm, too firm, like he was guarding a secret. Evelyn nodded quickly, stepping back, but her heart was hammering so loudly she felt like the whole room could hear it. Because even from the tiny glimpse she had seen, even from just the clothes and the stance, she was almost certain the boy in that portrait wasn't a Whitmore. He wasn't a millionaire's son. He was someone she knew, someone she loved like her own, someone who shouldn't be on a rich man's wall. Evelyn wiped her trembling palms on her apron. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And she wasn't sure she was ready for the truth hiding behind that cloth. Evelyn tried to steady her breath as she left the portrait room, but her mind was running like a river in storm. She clutched her cleaning cloth against her chest, forcing herself to move from one room to the next. But every motion felt disconnected from her body, like her hands worked. But her soul stayed trapped in front of that half-revealed painting. A portrait in a billionaire's mansion, featuring a boy from an orphanage. It made no sense. Unless something horrible had happened, something being hidden. Evelyn swallowed hard, pushing her mop down the hallway. She didn't like thinking badly of people, especially not of employers who treated their homes like temples you must never disturb. But a memory kept looping in her mind. The boy's smile, the way he used to grip her hand at night when thunder scared him, the way he looked at the world as if he was always searching for the part of it that would finally keep him. His name whispered in her chest like a bruise. Malik. She shook her head sharply. No, it couldn't be Malik. It had been years. He would be grown by now. That painting showed a teenager, maybe 17. Malik would be older. This had to be someone else, someone with the same posture, same shoes. Her thoughts broke when Bernard's sharp voice echoed behind her. Evelyn, Mr. Whitmore has arrived. Her stomach fell. Already? He wasn't supposed to return for hours. A wave of fear curled in her chest before she even understood why. Something about the way Bernard spoke made her feel exposed, like a secret she didn't mean to hold had already been discovered. She quickly tucked her cleaning supplies into the closet and smoothed her uniform. As she stepped into the foyer, she saw Adrian Whitmore striding in through the entrance, tall, commanding, carrying exhaustion on his shoulders like a heavy coat. His tie hung loose, and his eyes were the same cold, distracted eyes she remembered from the hiring interview. But today, something was different. Today his eyes looked haunted. Bernard stepped forward. "Sir, welcome back, everything is prepared." Whitmore nodded absently, then his gaze fell on Evelyn. He stopped walking. Not slowed. Stopped completely. For a split second, his expression flickered with confusion or recognition or something deeper. Evelyn felt her heart twist. She lowered her eyes respectfully, but she could feel his stare lingering. "Who is she?" Whitmore asked quietly. Bernard cleared his throat. "Evelyn Thomas, sir, one of the weekday maids. She was assigned to the portrait room earlier." A silence followed that felt like a held breath. Whitmore's jaw tightened. The portrait room, already. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. He wasn't talking about cleaning. He was talking about the painting. She forced her voice to remain steady. "I only dusted around the covered frame, sir. I didn't touch." "Did you see it?" Whitmore cut in. Her throat closed. Bernard stepped in quickly. "The cloth slipped, sir. A corner only. She didn't reveal the full portrait." Whitmore's eyes locked onto Evelyn again, sharp, calculating. She felt as if he was reading her mind, reading her memories, reading her fear. "What did you see?" he asked. "Nothing I recognize, sir," she lied too quickly. He noticed. His voice dropped lower, slower. "Look at me." She lifted her eyes reluctantly. There was pain in his expression. Real pain, not the kind painted on portraits or written in biographies. His eyes were red-rimmed, heavy, carrying the kind of grief that didn't announce itself, the kind that lived under the skin. "You looked like you knew him," Whitmore said, not an accusation, an observation. Evelyn forced her breath to stay calm. "I'm sorry, sir. I only saw the clothes. I didn't recognize anyone." Her answer didn't convince him. She could see it in the way his fingers curled slightly, in the way his gaze drifted momentarily toward the portrait room door, as if something inside there frightened him more than anything outside ever could. He dismissed her silently and walked away, but the tension in the air stayed behind like smoke. Evelyn stood frozen, unsure what she had just stepped into. It felt like she had accidentally opened a door that was never meant to be opened, and now the wind on the other side was rushing out, pulling her into a story she didn't choose. She grabbed her cleaning cart and tried to return to her work, but Bernard approached her again, blocking her path. His expression was unreadable, but there was a warning in it. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "no matter what you think you saw, forget it." Her hands tightened on the handle of the cart. "Yes, sir." He leaned closer, lowering his voice until it became almost a threat. "People who ask questions in this house do not stay long." Then he stepped away as calmly as if he had said nothing at all. Evelyn's chest ached. She felt cold from the inside. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want secrets. She just wanted to finish her shift, take the bus home, eat her leftover stew, and sleep without crying tonight. But as she moved through the mansion, trying to focus on dusting and polishing, her thoughts refused to settle. The portrait. The sneakers. Whitmore's reaction. Bernard's warning. Something was wrong, far beyond her job, far beyond a forgotten child's memory. And then everything changed. She reached the east hallway. It was the oldest part of the house, rarely used. The air felt cooler there, shadows clinging to the corners. She passed by a cracked door, the room where Whitmore stored personal belongings no one was allowed to touch. But today, the door wasn't just cracked open. It was wide open. Inside, scattered across the floor, lay dozens of photographs, some framed, some loose, all face down as if thrown in anger or despair. And in the middle of the room, sitting on the floor with his elbows on his knees, was Adrian Whitmore himself. Evelyn froze. Whitmore was holding a picture in his hands, but not like a man admiring something. He held it like a confession, like a wound. He didn't notice Evelyn at first. His shoulders were shaking slightly, not in the dramatic way people cry in movies, but in the quiet, fragile way men cry when they realize the world didn't protect what they loved. Evelyn hesitated at the doorway. She shouldn't be here. This was beyond boundaries, beyond roles, beyond safety. But then Whitmore looked up and she saw it. The picture he held was the same boy she had seen in the partially revealed portrait. And behind the boy, barely visible in the background, was Evelyn herself, younger, smiling, holding Malik's shoulder at the orphanage fence. Her breath vanished. Whitmore stared at her, his voice breaking for the first time since she met him. "You do know him, don't you?" Evelyn's world tilted. Her legs felt weak. Her heart screamed the name she had been trying to bury. "Malik." Evelyn stood frozen in the doorway, her fingers gripping the frame so tightly they almost numbed. The room felt too small, too quiet, too full of truths she wasn't ready to face. Her eyes stayed locked on the photograph in Whitmore's hands, her younger self smiling, the sun behind her, and Malik leaning against her side with that familiar half-smile he only used on days he felt safe. Years collapsed between them in a single breath. Whitmore didn't look angry, he looked shattered, like a man clinging to the last thread of something the world had already stolen from him. "Please," he whispered, "tell me you know him." The word *please hit her harder than any command ever could. Billionaires didn't say please. Men like him didn't plead. Yet here he was, knees on the floor, hair falling over his forehead, the weight of his secrets dragging him down. Evelyn stepped inside slowly. Each step felt like walking deeper into a past she had buried for survival. Her voice trembled. "His name is Malik." Whitmore closed his eyes, and a breath escaped him, broken, as if he'd been holding it for months. "Malik," he repeated, tasting the name the way someone tastes a memory they're afraid to lose. Evelyn's hands shook. "Sir, where did you get that picture?" He didn't answer. Instead, he rose to his feet, walked to the table, and picked up a folder. He opened it and spread several documents across the table. Adoption papers, school reports, medical forms, photos she never knew existed. Some pages were torn, others crumpled as if handled through grief. "That boy," Whitmore said, voice trembling, "he lived with me." Evelyn felt the room tilt. "Lived with you? Malik, that's not possible. He was never adopted. They said nobody." "They lied," Whitmore cut in, his voice sharp and wounded. "The orphanage lied. I adopted him when he was 9, brought him here, raised him." Evelyn covered her mouth. Her legs threatened to give out beneath her. Malik, the boy she had protected, fed, tucked into thin blankets, had been taken from the orphanage one silent morning. She remembered the confusion, the unanswered questions, the administrator's cold explanation that a distant relative had claimed him. But that wasn't the truth. Malik had been brought into this house, into wealth, into schooling, into a life she had prayed he'd someday deserve. So why was his portrait covered like a secret? Why was Whitmore crying alone on the floor? Evelyn whispered, almost afraid of the answer, "Where is he now?" Whitmore inhaled shakily, turning away from her. "Missing." The word cracked through the room like a fault line splitting open. Evelyn felt the floor disappear under her feet. "Missing? Since when?" He didn't turn. He stared out the window as if searching for something he had already lost. 3 months. He left school one morning. He never came home. Her heart squeezed painfully. Did he run away? "I don't know," Whitmore admitted. "He left behind everything, his backpack, his phone, his sketchbook." He paused, steadying his breath. "He didn't even take his favorite jacket." Evelyn's breath shook. Malik would never run away without that jacket. She knew that boy's heart, his fears, his dreams. He was the kind who held on to comfort like it was air. "Sir," Evelyn said softly, "why are you telling me this?" This time he turned to her, eyes red, jaw tight, hands trembling. "Because you're the only person he smiled like that with," he said, nodding at the photo. "I've looked through hundreds of pictures, and that smile, the one in this photo, I never saw it again." Evelyn's throat burned. She had only known him until he was 8. Then he was gone without warning, with no goodbye, no closure. And now he was gone again. Whitmore stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You know him in ways I never could. You know where he came from. You know how he thinks. I need you to tell me why he left, what I did wrong, why he didn't feel safe here." Evelyn took a step back instinctively. The pain radiating from him was too much, too raw. She wasn't prepared to carry someone else's grief while still drowning in her own. "Sir, I'm just a maid." "You are not just anything," Whitmore snapped, not harshly, desperately. "You knew him, you cared for him before I ever had the chance." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. She wasn't used to being looked at like she mattered, like her memories held value. But before she could respond, Bernard appeared in the doorway. His face froze when he saw the photos. The documents, Evelyn inside the room. His voice tightened. "Sir, you requested privacy." Whitmore straightened, the mask of control slipping back onto his face, but not fully. He gestured subtly toward Bernard. "Not now." Bernard's brows furrowed. "Sir, with respect, she is staff. She should not be." "Bernard," Whitmore said sharply, "leave us." The butler froze. Evelyn felt something shift, something dangerous. Bernard wasn't angry about her presence. Bernard was scared of something being uncovered. The tension between the two men thickened, and for the first time, Evelyn sensed a deeper war in the house, one that existed long before she glimpsed the portrait. Bernard eventually bowed and left, but not before giving Evelyn a look she couldn't read. Part warning, part threat, part fear. When the door closed, Whitmore exhaled shakily. "This house is full of secrets," he said quietly. "Some I didn't create, but I'm living with the consequences." Evelyn swallowed. "You think someone in this house knows what happened to him?" Whitmore didn't answer directly. Instead, he walked to the covered portrait in the next room. Evelyn followed slowly, her heart pounding with dread. He pulled the cloth down entirely. And there it was. Malik's portrait, life-sized, painted with a softness that broke her heart. His eyes were bright, hopeful, filled with dreams he never said aloud. His hands were tucked in the pockets of his jeans, the same jeans she had washed 1,000 times at the orphanage. Evelyn's hand flew to her chest. "Oh God, it really is him." Whitmore's voice cracked. "This was the last thing he gave me, his final school project. He painted himself." His voice trembled. "I didn't know it would be a goodbye." Evelyn felt tears spill down her cheeks. She reached toward the painting, her fingers stopping inches from the canvas. "He looks older, taller, but the eyes, they never changed." Whitmore brushed his thumb along the frame. "I've spent every day since searching for him. Police, private investigators, no leads, nothing." Evelyn whispered, "Why me? Why now?" His gaze softened, full of a pain she recognized. The pain of someone who finally admits they cannot fight alone. "Because when you looked at that portrait," Whitmore said, "you looked like you lost him too." Evelyn's voice broke. "I did." Whitmore swallowed hard. "Then help me." She looked up, trembling. "Help you do what?" His answer wasn't loud, but it carried the power of a man whose heart had already chosen truth over pride. "Help me find my son." Evelyn closed her eyes. Because for the first time, she realized something wasn't adding up. Malik didn't disappear. He was taken, and someone inside this mansion knew why. The mansion felt different after the truth slipped through its walls, heavier, as if every hallway carried an echo of Malik's footsteps. Evelyn followed Whitmore into the West Wing, a part of the house she had never been allowed to clean. Her hands remained clasped tightly in front of her, unsure if she was walking toward answers or danger. Whitmore's voice was distant, almost hollow. "He used to paint here. This studio was the only place he called his own." Evelyn stepped inside and felt her chest tighten. The room was still exactly as Malik must have left it. Brushes dipped in dried paint, scattered sketches, a blanket thrown carelessly over a small sofa. The room smelled faintly of turpentine and citrus soap, the same scent the boy used at the orphanage when she insisted he wash his hands before meals. Her eyes landed on a small cracked mug on the desk, the kind sold in dollar stores. She blinked hard. Malik had one just like it as a child, always insisting it was his lucky cup. She picked it up gently. "He kept this." Whitmore nodded. "He refused to replace it, said some things weren't meant to be upgraded." Evelyn swallowed. That sounded exactly like Malik. A silence grew between them, two people grieving the same boy in different ways, standing inside the last place he felt safe. But then Whitmore took a deep breath, steadying himself, as if shifting from memory into purpose. "I need you to look at something." He opened a drawer at the corner of the studio and removed a thin journal wrapped in an elastic band. The cover was smudged, stained with fingerprints, Malik's fingerprints. Evelyn's breath caught. She reached for it carefully, almost reverently. "He used to carry this everywhere," Whitmore murmured. "It went missing. Then I found it hidden behind his dresser 2 days after he disappeared." Evelyn felt a tremor run through her. Malik had always hidden things when he was scared. Notes, drawings, small objects, secrets he didn't trust adults with. Her fingers slid beneath the elastic band and opened the journal. The first pages were sketches, charcoal outlines of faces, hands, street corners. Malik had always been gifted, even as a child. But as she flipped further, the drawings changed. Darker, sharper, less art, more messages wrapped inside shapes. She paused on one page. It was a sketch of the mansion's staircase. But at the top of the stairs, a shadowy figure stood behind Malik, hand reaching toward him. Her skin prickled. "What is this?" she whispered. Whitmore leaned closer. "I don't know, but look at the date." She scanned the scribble in the corner, just 3 days before he vanished. Her pulse quickened. "Sir, Malik was scared of someone." Whitmore didn't argue. "I know." Evelyn turned the next page, a drawing of a locked door, then another of the east wing, the wing Whitmore rarely entered, a sketch of Bernard's silhouette, then a small line of words written shakily at the bottom of the page. "He knows I know." Evelyn stepped back instinctively, her heart hammering. "Sir, who did Malik think was after him?" Whitmore's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "I don't want to guess, I want to know." He took the journal from her gently, closing it like a fragile truth. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "there are people in this house who were closer to Malik than I was, people he trusted, or tried to." She understood instantly. They were walking into a nest of lies. And everyone in that nest had something to lose. Whitmore stepped toward the door. "Come with me, I need to show you the rest." As they left the studio, Evelyn glanced back one last time. Malik's world felt frozen, abandoned mid-breath, like he'd intended to return but never got the chance. Something twisted inside her chest. A sharp, maternal instinct she thought life had long beaten out of her. The hallway outside was dim. The old lights hummed above them, casting long shadows on the floor. Whitmore's footsteps echoed first, steady but tense. Evelyn walked 2 steps behind, hands clenched tightly in front of her apron. They passed the dining room as the afternoon sun spilled across the long table. Bernard stood near the head of it, inspecting a set of polished silverware. His eyes lifted as they walked by, lingering on Evelyn before shifting to Whitmore. "Sir," Bernard said, voice crisp, "I didn't expect you to be touring the staff areas." Whitmore didn't slow his stride. "I go where I choose." Bernard's face remained expressionless, but something shifted behind his eyes, a silent stiffness, a tightening of control. His gaze flickered to the journal in Whitmore's hand before returning to Evelyn with a look she recognized too well. "Trouble." Whitmore guided Evelyn toward the east hallway, the same hallway she had found him in earlier, surrounded by scattered photographs. As they walked, he lowered his voice. "I didn't just find pictures in that room earlier." Evelyn felt a ripple of dread. "What else?" Whitmore stopped at the end of the hall. The air felt colder there, the walls narrower. He turned to her and she saw fear flicker at the edges of his composure. "I found his room." Evelyn froze. "Malik's, but I thought this studio." "The studio was where he worked," Whitmore said softly, "not where he hid." He turned the doorknob slowly. Inside was a much smaller room, no windows, barely any light. Almost like a storage closet that had been transformed into a secret refuge. There was a thin mattress on the floor, blankets folded tightly, and a small lamp that flickered weakly. Evelyn felt her breath break. "Sir, why would he sleep in here?" Whitmore's voice cracked. "He didn't want me to know he stopped sleeping in his bedroom. He didn't want to worry me." Evelyn's throat tightened painfully. Malik had always hidden his fear like a wound, quiet, deep, covered with silence. "He was terrified," Whitmore whispered. "But of what, of who?" Evelyn stepped inside and knelt beside the mattress. There, under the pillow, she found something that made her heart stop. A small folded paper. She opened it carefully. 4 words stared back at her. "He's watching me sleep." Evelyn's hands shook violently. "Sir, someone was coming into his room." Whitmore's face drained of color. "I checked every camera. They were all disabled in the West Wing." Evelyn's breath came uneven. "Disabled by who?" Whitmore didn't answer, because they both knew who handled the security system. Bernard. But accusing him outright would be reckless, dangerous, and Evelyn could feel the walls listening. Whitmore stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. "Evelyn, I believe Malik tried to tell me something, but I didn't see it, not until he was gone." Her heart swelled with emotion, guilt, grief, fear blending into one. She reached out and touched the edge of the mattress. "He shouldn't have been alone, sir. Not in fear like this. Not again." Whitmore's voice trembled. "Help me find the truth." Evelyn looked up, eyes shining with a pain she couldn't hide. "I will, sir. For Malika, I will." And in that moment, the house seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that two souls had just formed an alliance powerful enough to shake its walls. But in the shadowed corner of the hallway, unseen by them both, a figure stepped quietly back. Listening, watching, remembering the words. "He's watching me sleep." And in that stillness, one truth became clear. The house wasn't just full of secrets. It was full of eyes. The town began shifting almost immediately after the strange night. People whispered more cautiously. Doors closed earlier. Curtains stayed drawn. And every conversation felt like it had a shadow behind it, something unsaid, something feared, something waiting. Mariah felt it the strongest. Every day she went to the mansion, feeling eyes on her, not real eyes, but an unseen presence that trailed behind her like a question mark. The mansion felt different now. The creaking floors sounded heavier, like footsteps with intent. The walls felt closer, the rooms darker, the air thicker. It wasn't just fear. It was anticipation. As if the house knew something she didn't. One morning, when she arrived earlier than usual, she found Mr. Vanderholt standing at the foot of the grand staircase with a leather-bound journal in his hand. He held it tightly, knuckles pale, eyes flaring with the kind of anger that comes from being cornered. "You need to stop asking questions about Elias," he said, not even waiting for her to greet him. Mariah straightened her posture. She didn't speak, she wanted him to talk first. People reveal more when they think they're in control. Vanderholt continued, voice low but sharp. "You are a housekeeper, Mariah. You clean floors, you polish tables, that is all." She absorbed the insult. It stung, but she didn't let him see it. "And yet," she said softly, "I'm the only one in this entire house who cares about what happened to your son." His jaw tightened. "You know nothing about my son." "I know enough," she whispered. "Enough to see the fear in your eyes every time I say his name." He took a step closer, towering over her. "That boy is not who you think he is," he said, "and you have no idea what kind of trouble you're walking into." Mariah replied gently, "Then tell me." But he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked away, the journal still clutched tightly, its pages packed with answers he would never willingly share. Later that week, the orphanage's legal files finally arrived, a bundle of old documents, records, reports, and personal logs dating back almost 2 decades. The box was heavier than she expected, and she could feel her heartbeat quickening as she carried it into her living room. This was it. These papers held the truth, whatever shape, size, or horror it came in. She brewed tea, though she knew she wouldn't drink it. Then she opened the box. The first thing she uncovered was the old attendance register, yellowed with age. She flipped through it, scanning the rows of names, looking for one in particular. Elias. And there it was. Name Elias. Age on arrival, infant. Notes abandoned at hospital, no family claims. Mariah's breath softened, tears welled instantly. She remembered the moment she first held him, tiny, crying, fragile. The way he calmed when she hummed to him, the way he clung to her finger like he was trying to anchor himself to this world. She turned more pages. Routine checkups, health logs, teacher assessments, growth charts. And then, a folder titled, Project Aurora ***. Her fingers froze. She had never heard of this, not once, and she worked there nearly 20 years. She pulled the folder open. Inside were medical reports, all stamped **confidential**. Strange measurements, brain scans, behavioral graphs, test evaluations that didn't look like anything a normal orphanage should be conducting. And on the last page, a signature, Dr. Harold Beaumont, lead genetic researcher, Vanderholt Foundation. Her stomach tightened. Vanderholt Foundation. The same name on the checks that funded the orphanage. The same name carved into the stone pillars outside the mansion. The same name that owned half the businesses in town. Mariah covered her mouth with her hand. A sickening thought crept in. Elias wasn't just an abandoned child. He was selected. She didn't know for what, but everything in her body screamed that it wasn't kindness. The phone rang suddenly, startling her so hard she dropped a stack of papers. She answered shakily. "Mariah, it's Dr. Reyes, the orphanage director. I went through the files you asked about. There's something you need to hear." Mariah straightened. "Go ahead." Dr. Reyes hesitated. "I don't know how to say this, but the documents show Elias wasn't the only child assigned to Project Aurora." Mariah's voice dropped to a whisper. "What do you mean?" "There were 9 others." Her body tensed. "Where are they?" she asked. Dr. Reyes exhaled shakily. "Dead, all of them." A cold numbness spread up Mariah's spine. "Except Elias, the only one who survived." Dr. Reyes added, "They died under strange circumstances. They wrote it off as accidents, but it's too many coincidences." Mariah swallowed hard. "And Elias, how did he disappear?" There was a silence. Then Dr. Reyes replied, "He didn't disappear on his own." Another pause. "He was taken." Mariah's blood ran cold. "Taken by who?" The director breathed heavily, as though afraid someone might be listening. "Mariah, all the files link back to the same name, Jonathan Vanderholt." Mariah felt like the room spun. Dr. Reyes whispered, "You're in danger. Do you understand? Whatever you're digging into, whoever Elias really was, the people behind this won't let you expose them. You need to be careful." Mariah whispered back, voice trembling, "I'm not stopping." "You should." "I can't." "Mariah," Dr. Reyes said softly, "find the boy. That's the only way you'll get answers, but do it quietly. If anyone realizes you know the truth." Mariah finished the sentence for her. "They'll come for me." The line went dead. Mariah sat there in silence, Elias' old file in her hands, surrounded by a storm of papers that told a story darker than anything she imagined. But one thing was clear. If Elias was alive, then he was the key. And she was the only person still fighting for him. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Vanderholt paced the length of his study with frantic energy. He had the journal open on his desk, old newspaper clippings scattered around him. A picture of Elias, older, maybe 16, stared up from the desk. Not a portrait. A surveillance photo. Taken secretly. At a gas station. 4 years ago. Vanderholt rubbed his forehead. "He's alive," he whispered. "I knew it." He sat heavily in his chair. "And now she knows too." He thought of Mariah. Of the questions she kept asking. Of the fear she had stirred in him, the fear he tried so hard to hide. He reached for his phone. Dialed a number. A man answered with a low voice. "Yes, sir." Vanderholt said quietly, "Keep an eye on her." "Already am." "And if she gets too close?" He hesitated, then finished. "Handle it." He hung up and stared at the portrait of Elias on the wall. A single sentence escaped him, as though he didn't dare say it louder. "I'm sorry, son, but this cannot come out." Mariah didn't know it yet. But the walls were closing in. People were watching her, listening, tracking her every move. The hunt had already begun, and she was still walking straight toward the truth, with nothing more than hope, memory, and a mother's courage to protect her. The night air outside the Vanderholt mansion was thick and suffocating. Rain had begun to fall in fine, icy needles, soaking the ground and creating small rivers along the driveway. Mariah crouched behind the hedge, staring at the mansion's glowing windows. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet were planted. She had come too far to turn back now. Elias, Malik, was inside somewhere, and she could feel it. Her fingers clutched the stack of files she had risked everything to gather. Each page told a story of injustice, greed, and secrecy. Every report screamed that Malik had been stolen from her care, from the only home that had loved him, and raised in a gilded cage filled with lies and danger. A shadow moved past the window, tall, deliberate. Bernard, always Bernard. She felt her chest tighten. He hadn't noticed her yet, but she knew he was methodical, like a predator who waited for the right moment. Taking a deep breath, she slid the side door open and slipped inside. The mansion smelled of polished wood, expensive cologne, and secrecy. Every step she took felt like it echoed too loudly, and yet she couldn't stop moving. She had to see him to find the boy she had raised and lost. She reached the hallway outside the east wing, the same corridor where she had first glimpsed the portrait. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight, but she pressed on. The journal in Whitmore's hands had been cryptic, full of sketches, notes, and a trail she hadn't realized she'd been following all this time. She paused in front of the door to Malik's hidden room, the secret studio that had become a prison of silence. The door was slightly ajar. A faint light glowed from within. She pushed it gently and stepped inside, and there he was. Malik, taller now, almost a man, his eyes wide and alert. He looked exactly as she remembered, and yet older, hardened by life, wary in a way only someone who had been taken from childhood could be. His fists were clenched at his sides. "Mariah," his voice cracked with disbelief. She rushed forward and enveloped him in the hug she had dreamed of for 12 years. His arms were hesitant at first, then squeezed her back fiercely, as if he were afraid she might disappear too. "I've been looking for you," she whispered, "every single day." I thought no one was coming," he stammered, tears glistening in his eyes. "I thought I was alone." "You're not alone, Malik. I'm here now." He pulled back slightly, scanning her face as if trying to memorize it after all those years. Then his gaze darted around the room, tense, suspicious. "They're still watching," he muttered. Mariah's stomach dropped. "Who?" Bernard stepped from the shadows. The butler's face was stern, unreadable. "I warned you," he said quietly. "This isn't a place for questions. You should have left." Malik's eyes widened in recognition and fear. I knew someone was following me, keeping tabs." His voice trembled. "I tried to hide, but I knew they'd never stop." Mariah turned slowly toward Bernard, her voice firm. "Why did you take him? Why did the Vanderholts take him from me?" Bernard's jaw tightened. "I didn't take him. I was following orders. You don't understand." "I understand enough," Mariah's voice cracked. "He's a child, my child. You don't get to steal him from love and safety." Malik's eyes darted between them. "Mariah, I'm scared. They told me if I ever left it would be worse than staying. I can't do this anymore." Mariah's heart ached. She reached for his hand, feeling the tension, the fear, the years of uncertainty in his grip. "You can, Malik. You can fight now. You have to trust me." Suddenly, the sound of a door slamming echoed from the hall. Whitmore appeared, rain dripping from his coat, eyes blazing with desperation and fear. "Stop!" he shouted. "Both of you." Mariah stepped protectively in front of Malik. "Sir, he's afraid. He's scared because someone here has been controlling him, watching him, threatening him." Whitmore's face twisted with rage and guilt. "Do you know what I've lived with?" he roared. "Every day, since the moment he was taken, I've carried the blame, the fear, the secrets. And now, after everything, you've come into this house thinking you can fix what's been broken for years." Malik stepped back, eyes wide. "Sir, I just want to be free." Whitmore's voice broke, softer now. "Free," he whispered. "Free is dangerous, free is cruel. You don't know what they'll do if they find out you're gone." Mariah's gaze was steady. "Let him decide. He's not a prisoner of your wealth or your fear. He's a human being, and I'm not leaving without him." A tense silence filled the room. Bernard moved closer, a silent warning, but even he seemed unsure of what to do next. The room felt like it had shrunk, the walls pressing in, the shadows waiting to strike. Malik's voice was trembling but determined. "Mariah, I want to go. I don't care about the consequences. I can't live like this anymore." Whitmore sank into the nearest chair, defeated. He buried his face in his hands. I tried to protect him. I thought keeping him here, keeping him away from the world, was the only way to keep him safe." Mariah stepped closer, kneeling beside him. "Safety isn't this, sir. He was safe with love, with me, with those who truly cared. Not with secrets, not with walls, not with fear." Whitmore looked up at her, tears streaking his face. I don't know how to fix this." "You start by letting him go," she said firmly. "Let him make his own choice." Malik hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I'm ready. I can't stay here, not another day. I have to live my life." Whitmore's chest heaved. The weight of years of guilt and control seemed to lift slightly. "If you walk out that door, you walk into a world I can't shield you from," he said softly. "But if it's what you want, I won't stop you." Mariah extended her hand to Malik. "Come with me, we'll face the world together." He took it, gripping it tightly, as if holding on to both courage and hope. Bernard stepped aside, silent, watching the reunion with something almost like regret. As they moved toward the front door, Whitmore called after them. "Wait!" His voice was urgent, desperate. "Before you leave, there's something you need to know." Mariah and Malik paused, glancing back. "I failed you," he said, voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting you, Malik, but in the end I lost sight of what mattered most: love." Malik's lips trembled, but he nodded. "I know, sir, I know." Whitmore swallowed hard, wiping the tears from his cheeks. "I'll do whatever I can to make amends if you let me, but the rest is your life now." The rain had turned into a steady downpour outside. Mariah opened the front door and Malik stepped into it, rain soaking his hair, soaking his clothes. But there was light in his eyes, a mixture of fear and freedom, the kind that comes when chains are broken. Together they walked down the steps of the mansion. Each step was heavy with the weight of the past, but lighter than anything they had carried before. Whitmore watched from the doorway, silent, knowing the mansion would never be the same. As they reached the gate, Mariah looked at Malik. "This is just the beginning, but you're not alone." He smiled through the rain, a real smile, unguarded and free. "I know, Mariah, I know." Behind them, the mansion loomed like a ghost of the past, grand, imposing, full of secrets, but it no longer held power over them. The storm raged around them, but inside, Malik felt the calm of someone finally home. And in that moment, Mariah realized something. The truth could be terrifying, it could hurt, it could shake everything they thought was safe, but it was also liberating. They had faced it, they had survived, and together they would write the rest of the story. The rain had stopped. Morning light broke over the horizon, painting the streets with gold and silver streaks that shimmered across the puddles. Malik and Mariah walked quietly through the neighborhood, their footsteps echoing softly on the wet pavement. For the first time in years, Malik was moving through the world not as a child stolen, not as a secret in someone else's mansion, but as himself, free to breathe, to think, to choose. Mariah glanced at him. His shoulders were tense, but his eyes were lighter than they had been in a long time. "Do you want to talk about last night?" she asked gently. Malik shook his head. "Not yet, I needed to get out, away from that house, away from all the shadows, but I do want to understand everything. Who I was, what they did, why?" His voice trailed off. Mariah nodded. "We'll take it one step at a time, you'll learn the truth, but right now you need to know you're safe, you're with me." He smiled faintly. It wasn't the full smile of a child at play, but a careful, guarded smile, the kind that grows into hope. They arrived at a small cafe, warm and fragrant, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filling the air. Mariah had chosen it deliberately, a place ordinary enough that Malik could begin to feel the normalcy he had been denied for years. Sitting across from each other, she watched him pick at a piece of toast, his fingers trembling slightly. She knew the trauma wouldn't disappear overnight. Every touch, every memory of the mansion, of the surveillance, of being controlled, would linger. But he was alive, he was free, and for now, that was enough. "Mariah," he whispered, breaking the quiet, Did they know I'd survive?" Mariah reached out, covering his hand with hers. "They didn't expect you to, but you were strong, Malik, stronger than anyone could have guessed. That's why you're here now." He looked down, blinking back tears. "I always felt guilty, for leaving, for hiding, for not being brave enough." "You weren't alone," she said firmly. "You were surviving, and surviving isn't weakness, it's courage. You protected yourself the only way you could, and now you don't have to do it alone." He exhaled, a long, shaky breath that carried years of tension with it. I want to start over. I want to live like a normal kid, no secrets, no fear." Mariah smiled softly. "Then we'll make that happen. We'll get through the paperwork, the counseling, everything, but you'll be in control. Every step is yours." For the first time in his life, Malik nodded with certainty. He wasn't just a child lost in the world anymore. He was someone who could make choices, reclaim his life, and even forgive the people who had tried to cage him in silence and fear. Back at the mansion, Whitmore sat alone in his study. The rain had ceased, but the mansion felt hollow, almost guilty in the quiet aftermath. He stared at the portrait of Malik that still hung covered in the portrait room, the unfinished canvas now holding more than just a boy. It held regret, realization, and hope deferred. He picked up the phone, dialing a number he had avoided for years. When the line clicked, he spoke softly, almost reverently. Bernard, he's gone. The boy, he's free. I can't control it anymore. We've done enough harm. There was a pause on the line, heavy and tense. Then Bernard replied, "Yes, sir, I understand." Whitmore closed his eyes. "Make sure no one else is trapped here again. That house, it has been full of secrets, yes, but it doesn't have to destroy anyone else." Silence followed, but for the first time it felt purposeful, intentional. He had made a step toward atonement, toward change. Days later, Malik's world began to expand. He reconnected with old friends from the orphanage, with teachers who remembered him fondly, and with neighbors who never knew his story but welcomed him warmly. He attended school like any other teenager, discovering both the mundanity and the beauty of ordinary life. The smell of freshly cut grass, the taste of pizza, the laughter of peers that didn't carry the weight of fear. Mariah remained his constant, not as a guard, not as a warden, not as someone who dictated his life, but as a mentor, a protector, and a friend. She taught him to trust again, to believe that people could act with kindness rather than calculation, and to hold on to hope even when the world had been cruel. Whitmore made efforts too. He donated the orphanage files to authorities, ensured that other children in his foundation were treated ethically, and quietly funded initiatives to protect vulnerable children. He knew he could never undo what had been done, but he could prevent future harm. One afternoon, Malik stood on a small hill overlooking the city, the wind tossing his hair in wild streaks. Mariah stood beside him, holding a thermos of hot chocolate. The sky was wide and open, painted with sunset hues. "I never thought I'd see this," Malik admitted quietly. "The sky, the city, the world." Mariah smiled. "It's all yours now, Malik, all of it. You don't have to fear it anymore." He laughed softly, a sound that felt like it had been locked inside for years. "I don't feel scared, not really. I feel alive." "And you should," she said. "You've survived what most people couldn't even imagine. You've survived betrayal, lies, and fear. Now it's time to live." Malik looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and love in his gaze. "I never thought anyone would fight for me like you did. I don't even know how to say thank you." Mariah shook her head. "You don't have to. Living your life, being happy, that's enough." And at that moment, Malik understood something he had never before. Freedom wasn't just being away from the people who hurt you. It was being able to step into the life you were always meant to have, with those who truly loved you. Weeks later, Malik returned to the orphanage, not as a resident but as a visitor. He met with the new children, sharing stories, drawing sketches, and quietly inspiring them with his courage. The staff watched, astonished by his poise, by the way he carried himself, by the gentle authority in his voice that came from experience, not birthright. Mariah watched from a distance, proud yet protective. She knew the world would test him in ways she could not always prevent, but she also knew Malik had the strength to face it. Whitmore visited once, quietly, leaving books and art supplies for the children. He never sought recognition, only atonement. And though Malik didn't fully forgive him yet, there was an understanding that their worlds were linked, scarred together by the past, yet capable of rebuilding trust slowly, carefully. Malik's room in his new home was filled with sunlight. Posters, sketches, and small mementos of both his childhood and his survival adorned the walls. His journal lay open on his desk, ready to capture the next chapter of his life, not one dictated by fear but by choice. Mariah entered quietly, placing a cup of hot cocoa on the desk. "Ready to start your new chapter?" Malik looked up and smiled, genuinely this time. "I think so, I'm ready." She nodded, pride and relief washing over her. "Good, because the world doesn't get to define you anymore. You do." And for the first time in his life, Malik believed it. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the horrors that had taken place within the mansion walls, unaware of the courage it had taken to defy secrecy, fear, and control. But Malik knew. He knew he had survived, he had fought, and he had won a life that was truly his. And in that victory, he found something more important than freedom: hope. Hope that he could heal. Hope that he could love. Hope that he could finally be the boy who had once waited behind the orphanage gate, holding on to dreams too fragile to name. Because now Malik was not hidden, he was not silenced, he was alive. And he would never be taken from himself again. Some truths are heavy. Some secrets can break a life before it even begins. But courage, love, and persistence have a way of cutting through even the thickest darkness. Malik's story reminds us that no matter how deep the shadows, a single person who believes in justice, in kindness, and in the power of love can make all the difference. Mariah never gave up. She risked everything, her job, her safety, her heart, because she knew the boy who had been taken from the orphanage deserved a chance to live freely. And Malik, despite years of fear, betrayal, and loss, found the strength to reclaim his life. Together, they proved that even in the face of wealth, power, and secrecy, truth and compassion can prevail. The mansion still stands, full of secrets, but its grip on fear has been broken. Whitmore has begun to face his own mistakes, learning that protection without understanding is not love. Bernard's silence and obedience could not contain the courage of those who refused to remain passive. And Malik is finally free, not just from the walls of a mansion, but from the weight of a stolen childhood. This story is a reminder that justice isn't always instant, and redemption is rarely neat. Sometimes it comes in the form of persistence, in small acts of bravery, in the refusal to accept that the world's cruelty is permanent. And sometimes, the smallest voice, the maid who cared, the friend who listened, can awaken the strongest hope in the most unexpected places. If this story touched you, let it remind you to see the unseen, speak for the silenced, and fight for the forgotten. One act of courage, one choice to stand for what is right, can change a life. It can save a child, restore dignity, and bring justice where there was only fear. So when you think you are powerless, remember Mariah and Malik. Remember that love, integrity, and persistence are more powerful than money, secrets, or fear. And remember, the world is changed not by those who remain silent, but by those brave enough to act. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to believe in hope, resilience, and the power of standing up for what is right. Because sometimes one story, one voice, one act of courage can change everything.